Come on in. Welcome to the ReJean studio. Small but everything we need. We've got our cutting table here, our Juki sewing machine, where all the magic happens. This is our overlocker over here. We use that for finishing off seams and stuff, and general pile of fabric. Always features somewhere. This is our new industrial iron, which we're very proud of. We only got this yesterday, so very excited. This is our pride and joy. This is our best bit of kit. This is the Reese 101 buttonhole machine. It's actually a refurbished buttonhole, so you can see the old gold leaf detailing and the beautiful green colour. This is like my baby, my pride and joy. All our threads and stuff's up there, and just general rail of work in progress stock. So we're based in Glasgow. We're based in the Barras. Barras is quite a kind of iconic East End area of Glasgow, and we really love being based here. We're right next to the world famous McIver's Market. Yeah, and you got the Barrowland Ballroom, so it's just like a really nice place to be based. So hopefully we can stay here for as long as possible. And we're in this kind of cool venue, which is called Barra's Art and Design. Yeah. Today we're gonna make the Coalesce Zero tote bag. This tote bag is kind of like a mix of like old and new. So you take a sort of plain piece of fabric and you make up like a raw patchwork side. So each panel, so we've got the front panel, the back panel, and then like the depth of the bag. And so each panel, one half will be sort of raw new denim, and the other half is all sort of raw remnants. And we sort of patch them together raw and let them fray, and it kind of shows that beauty of dishevelled materials, I guess, instead of all the kind of new cleanness. So it's a mixture of like something raw and messy and something clean. We've got these nice straps on the bag, and it's fully lined. This is a dead stock cotton sateen. There's one patch pocket, and there's one sort of zipper pocket to keep your belongings safe. This one has snap fasteners to close the bag. So it's just a really big oversized tote bag, but you can make it a bit smaller by doing these. And you get, oh, that's come undone. You get a sort of nice shape like that if you maybe didn't have that much stuff in it. And then obviously if you're going away for the weekend or you're getting loads of stuff while you're out in your day, you can open it and it's a little bit bigger. So yeah, so we're gonna make this today. So over here, I've been very organized and pre-cut. So this is the sort of clean panel. And these are all the raw bits of fabric that we're essentially just gonna stitch on top of each other. You have to be quite careful to make sure that when you're laying them on top, that you're kind of catching enough of the fabric underneath and making sure that there's no holes or any points of wear. Yeah. So I'm gonna pin all this together and we're gonna stitch it all up. I'm using a navy thread today, which I think will be quite nice with the blues, the beiges, and against the black. And if you guys have bought a kit at home, you'll have all of this pre-cut, and you get to kind of design your own patchwork with all the remnants that have been sent out to you, okay? And I always like to put in a little bit of hardware, some like buttons or a zip or something. I think it's a nice detail, but maybe you don't like that, it's totally up to you. So I've sort of laid this out, but I'm not gonna pin it all like that. I'm gonna sort of gradually layer it up. So, and this is when it gets tricky, because if I've laid it all out and then I take it all off, how, you know, will it go back the original way? But we'll do it, we'll see how we go. So I've got 4 bits here. So basically this panel is just gonna replicate this. So I'm gonna build all of this up, and then I'm gonna lay that on top and chalk around it and make sure they're both the exact same. So use my pins here, just roughly. And you don't, I'm gonna stitch this on an industrial machine, which means this Juki only does a straight stitch. But you at home might be using a domestic, in which case you can use a straight stitch, you can use a zigzag stitch. It's totally up to you. I recommend taking a couple of scraps, just layering them up and having a little play with the stitch settings on your machine and see what you like. But yeah, we're just going to use a straight stitch for today. Yeah, so we'll just pin this. And just as you're pinning, just double check that you're not going to have any huge gaps. So see here, that's all covered fine. This is a magnetic pin cushion, if anybody's wondering what that is. Very handy to have. I've kind of pinned like half of the patchwork together. There's not too much going on there. I tend to always pin horizontally against your vertical stitch line. I find that holds the fabric better, and it means if I'm stitching down here, I should be able to just stitch straight over the needle, just in case you're wondering why I'm pinning like that. It's a good helpful tip for sewing at home. So I'll put a few more in. Cool, so that's all pinned in place. I'm going to sit down at the machine. Sorry, it's not that paper. Remember to always like back tack at the start, or turn the machine on, that would also help. And I tend to just run the foot along the edge, the outside of the foot along the edge of the raw edge. I'm using quite heavyweight thread, which is really strong, but you might just be using normal thread in the house, so you might want to do a few lines of stitching if you feel it's weak or anything, but that's totally up to yourself. And it's up to you when you've got scraps of fabric. You can, I'm just going to stitch straight and kind of make it up as I go along, but I can go down there later. Just make sure everything is stitched down basically. And obviously things are going to be layered on top, so don't worry too much. I'm not even stitching on anything here, but that's okay. I'm just going to nip across here now. So that's most of that done. I'm going to just come off the machine and stitch up here. Take out some pins. I think that's us for this section. So we'll just take out all the pins and trim all our threads. Okie doke, so now we're going to just layer up some more pieces. And this is when it gets interesting, if it looks anything like what you had originally cut out. And I'm just gonna like double check how much I need to cover. So actually we're totally fine, we just need a little bit down here. see who that is. That's grand, everything's covered now, so any other little scrappy bits are kind of just aesthetics. And if you are putting on hardware, you want to think about where the straps are going to go, which we'll mark out. But just try to bear that in mind if you're stitching on any hardware. If I put this on there, the strap's going to want to go right over that, so we're not going to put that on right there. So you need to sort of bear that in mind. So I think I'll put the hardware right down there, and that should be fine. So let's pin all this on. I'm gonna steal some more pins from very skinny pincushion. I use glass-headed pins because the denim's quite thick and they tend to be the only ones that actually work. Let's go through all the fabric and all the different layers. Bit off just now. Few more. We don't need to pin it too crazy. Just when you are stitching all this on, you need to make sure that the way you layer it up, all the fabric is laying flat. You don't want to distort it and get little lumps. So just be really careful when you're pinning it. I've kind of ended up putting all the strips of fabric on like vertical strips because I guess that is the natural grain line. But if you are starting to go into weird shapes or totally against the grain, just be really careful. And if you are starting to get lumps and bumps, you're probably best to just unpick it and start again. I've probably got too many layers on this, but we're just going to go with it. I think that will be okay. One more pin here to secure this. We've got just the right amount of overlap there, so just be mindful if you've got any wee sections like that. Boom, and then we'll just fling that on at the end. So I'm just gonna kind of work along the way because there's a lot of raw pieces on here. And then if you know you're kind of going over a few layers, it's always worth having a wee check underneath to make sure everything's lying as it should. So here I can see that's wanting to do wee bumps. I'm just being quite mindful that everything is going to be okay. And sometimes you will need to readjust as you go, that's okay. you can kind of come on and off as many times as you want, but I'm gonna try and just, it's kind of like a continuous line drawing with a sewing machine. That's just a seam under there, but I'm just checking the bulk as I go. I'm actually just going to come off at the end here and start on again and kind of reassess my plan. So I think I'm going to start from up here, go down along here, probably nip over there and get this last bit, and then we just have little hardware details to put on. So almost there. What did I say I'd do this bit? Sounds like my spool is about to finish, or the thread. Right. I might need to cut this bit out. These are like wound really badly, and the thread always gets caught on the bottom. It's so annoying. And it's like really fucking expensive thread. It does make sense. Cut that, obviously. Literally. That'll be fine. And so we're just going to nip down here and across, and then I think we've cut all of the fabric remnants. No. Just do a wee check. That should make it, the cut line should be about there. So the strap's going to sort of go up like that, so I think we should just pop this right here, and I'm going to live vicariously, and I'm not even going to pin it. And voila! We'll just trim the threads. Yeah, there are some chalk lines there, but I really like that colour, so I will get rid of them, obviously, at the end. I'll just check the back. Obviously this will be lined, so it doesn't matter too much, but I like to trim the threads. You've got a little bit there, but that's okay. Yeah, all good. So this is the back, that's the front. And so we almost have our whole front piece. So this is the we're going to use this as a pattern piece. And I think we're a tiny little minuscule bit shy there, so I'm going to cut a little bit. I'm going to cut around the rest of it, and then I'll patch another tiny bit there, because that's a little bit of an issue, but that's okay. Where are my big scissors? So yeah, we're just cutting around, get all the layers off. So actually, in hindsight, once we've cut that, it's pretty minuscule, and we'll probably catch all of that in the seam allowance. So I think we can get away with it. So this is our two pieces. I'm actually quite happy with how it's turned out. The palette's quite nice. So yeah, this is our front panel. This is a patchwork side, and this is a plain side. We're going to do a seam here, so if you've done any kind of sewing before, the general rule is right sides together. So right side, check they match up nicely. You can pin along here. Oh, let me just pin to be good. And again, I always pin the opposite way from the direction that I'm stitching. So you don't need too many. That will just hold it all in place. Check we're happy on both sides. And we're just going to do 1 centimetre seam allowance. And yeah, and I'll do a wee top stitch after as well. Doesn't matter if you start from the top or the bottom. I find it easier to put the raw stuff underneath. So yeah, I always start about 1 centimetre or so in, put the needle down, back tack, and that just means that the fabric isn't struggling to get under the foot. The fabric's already kind of immersed totally under the foot, so it can handle all this material. That's probably a generous centimetre. And did that back tack? I think that's fine. Trim your threads. We don't need to, you can overlock the edges if you wish, but again, because it's all going to be lined, it's not imperative. So it's totally up to you. If you didn't want to line it, you could bind your seams with some bias binding, but generally I think the lining's a nice addition. So now we're just going to do a little top stitch down here. You can either do your top stitch like right in there, or for this one I'm actually going to do it about 1/2 centimetre, so I'm going to run the edge of the foot along the seam, and again we'll just back tack. And my top tip for top stitching is don't look at the needle. Look at the fabric or where you're sewing, but apparently if you look straight at the needle, it's got more of a chance of veering off. So look at the line that you're following, but don't look at the needle if you find top stitching daunting for whatever reason. So there we go, we'll give that a wee press. And yeah, over to my pride and joy. I'm just going to move this off because this is the other band. I get to show off my new iron. some good seam action. All right, so that's one panel, and we're just going to go ahead and stick the straps on this straight away. So if you are following along at home, you'll have all the measurements in the instructions, but I'm going to grab a tape measure. So it tends to be about 8 inches apart, so that's 4 inches. So if you measure 4 inches from the center seam, and mark that there, and mark that there. This webbing, which will be sent out to you if you're following along, is quite heavy. I wouldn't even bother trying to pin it. I'll take a ruler and I'll mark the line. If you're using wax shop, it will, the iron will get rid of it, so don't worry too much. So if it's 8 inches apart at the bottom, I'm going to measure what it is up here. It's about, we'll go for 6. So it just tapers in slightly. So it's 4 inches out from the center seam at the bottom, and then it's 3 inches out from the center seam at the top. And we're not going to stitch it right to the top, because if you look here, this sort of folds in like a facing. So we will leave, I think it's about, we'll call it 2 inches. So about 2.5 inches from the top will be where we'll finish stitching the straps. Let me just get that there. So these are pattern masters. If you're kind of doing a lot of sewing, these are a good investment. We get some good curves for pattern drafting and stuff. So I'm just going to draw my lines. And so from here to here, that's sort of the inside of the strap, and then it's hard to see it so that's white, but I know what it is. Now I've lost it. Oh, it's there, perfect. So we'll do from there. You can see how we're missing that hardware, which is strategically placed. And yeah, so I'm gonna take the straps and I'm gonna stitch all the way up, down and along. Make sure your strap isn't twisted at the top. And then again, I'll do the same here. Like I said, this is really heavyweight, so there's no point pinning that, I would say. So let's stick it on. Doesn't really matter what side you want to start with, that's totally up to you. Just make sure your threads are out the way. Obviously this is on a bit of a curve, don't worry about curving that round like that, we'll just trim that off when we get to that bit. Always remember to back tack. And off we go. Right, so that's one side, and then yeah, just make sure it's not twisted at the top like so. So just go around like that, and this side isn't, it's a bit less bulky, so it should be easier to sew. And that's one half of the bag. Because the strap's on, it's starting to feel like we're making something now. It's starting to take shape. So we're going to repeat this. We're just going to do this again. So for the other bag, for the other panel, if you look at this bag, it's up to you. Well, it depends how I've cut it on your kit, but you can have both of your sort of solid panels on the same side of the back, or, you know, it can be alternate. Like that side could be solid, that side could be raw, and then that could be solid, that could be raw. Like there's no right or wrong. It's totally up to you. So this is the other piece. So again, I've like semi-arranged this in advance. We could probably go ahead and just do this all in a oneer, actually. So that's our right side, so that's the solid panel, this is the raw bit. The kind of best part about this is picking the colour palette. So we've gone for kind of different shades of blues, dark blues, a few light blues, and some kind of neutral ecru beigey colours. But if I've got, say, a green solid colour, I'll get some like purples or just kind of whatever I can find upstairs. But the fun part is building the palette, I guess. So yeah, we're just gonna pin all of this. Sorted. Let me just get that going the right way. Yeah, it's looking good, eh? So again, the numbers were 4 inches in from the side and then 3 inches, and we stopped it stitching about 2.5 inches from the top. So I'm gonna find that ruler. There it is, hiding underneath. So two and a half. There's a line here. So this is going to be where the top of the bag. We're going to fold this down, so this will be the finished. The bag will finish about to that length. That will come later. So 3 inches. We mark there, and 3 inches we mark there, and then down to the bottom, and it's 4 and 4, so And this is grey down here, so the wax will show up. Just draw a wee line. There we go. And this one. Oh. Now, I have always sometimes been like, oh, should I fuse the bag? If you want the bag to be really stiff for whatever reason, it's totally up to you. I kind of, when I produce the bags, I actually haven't, because I don't think it's necessary, but it's something I've always kind of thought about. So yeah, if for whatever reason you think it needs stiffened, I don't know if you're doing this with your own fabrics in the house and you're using something lighter weight, totally get some fusing or whatever, and you can back this, and it'll just make it a bit sort of firmer. It'll appear like a heavier weight fabric, I guess. So yeah, welcome to do that. I'm just going to trim this a little bit off. And this is a good time to actually just double check that there aren't any gaps. I think we're all good. All good. So we'll stitch the second strap on. Tape measures falling off. So you have two panels, and so the way this one is worked is that on the other side it's plain patch, so it's like whatever that is. So now we're going to do the base, and that's the zip. So I've actually decided to like just put a whole waistband around the base for fun. I've got the other piece underneath. Just trying to lift off the scraps and not lose their place too much. All right, so here we are again. I think I'll just build this one up a bit slower. So that will go on last. And it should be fine. So I'm just going to do these 3 bits and then I'm going to make that up and put them together. this is the patchwork side of the base. So we're just gonna pop this on and cut it down to size. And so there's a chunky seam up there, so this is gonna need to be near the bottom because you don't want a chunky seam like that at the top of the bag. But here it's nice, clean, flat, so we'll have that by the top. Just always thinking about these wee things and like the greater dynamic of the piece that you're making. And that needs squared off down here anyway. So we shall get our pattern master out. As you can tell, I'm working very messily. So pattern masters are great because they've got that centre line there, and I can just square this off really easily. Right, so yeah, we said, because that's right there. We will, so this pattern piece, I've actually cut it quite generously. There's normally a little bit of extra, so actually I'm going to go back on what I just said. This will probably get cut off once we stitch onto that. So that's going to be the edge, and this will be the seam. So yeah, right sides together, right side, stitch down. So we're going to take one of these panels, and this is a good time to, if you're stitching on a label, so again, if you've got one of our kits, these will be provided. But if you're making one of your own stuff, it's a good time to put on the label. So we'll put the ReJean on the kind of patchwork side because I don't know, because I want to. The most important part. So we're going to stitch this on. So you definitely want to pin this, and you need to be kind of mindful that you're not stretching it too much around the corners. Because we're going around in a circle, we'll stitch it, and we might need to cut into that just to let it sit nice. I'm just going to steal some pins from the pincushion of doom. So I just want to be super careful that that's matching up nicely. Not going to want to pin around the straps because that's not going to happen. But yeah, just be really careful not to stretch the fabric, and you'll be grand. This is actually a tiny bit short, so I'm going to go back on what I said and we're going to make it fix. It's just a wee centimetre. But actually there's a, see how that's kind of overlapping there, so I'm just going to chop that down. So I'm going to pin that there and then make it all fit. pull out all your pins. Boom, and then we'll just stick the other panel on. We'll get that pinned. So we're just gonna pin 1, 2, 3 to make sure it's all gonna fit. Don't put pins in your mouth like I'm doing. Spit out, very dangerous. Just gonna grab a few more pins. Okay, so we've got one there and one each side, and that's gonna make sure it fits. And then we'll just work our way down. That's fitting pretty nice. Because it's the second side and I kind of know it fits, I'm not going to do too many, but anytime I decide to skip this stage I always regret it, so definitely pin as much as you want when you're doing the base. So one more, that's grand, and we'll whip that on. Starting to take shape now, it's pretty much back. That's the exterior pretty much done. But what we're gonna do is we're going to press it down and stitch around that finished line, and then we'll make up the lining and that just gets attached there. That's it. Pretty. So we're gonna line this bag, and I've cut the lining, I've left it down here. So there's not as many pieces for this. So you got each bag and the base. So these are our two pockets. This is going to be the patch pocket. And I don't really have, I'm going to just use the purple zip because that's what I've got. It's actually quite a good length. So we're going to actually put a bit of fusing under here and fold it under that way, but let's do the patch pocket first. So we're going to press this in place. So we're just pinning on our pocket. This is just a patch pocket, so we're literally just going to stitch around. Cause I've got quite thick thread, I'm just going to do one line, but you guys are welcome to do a double line or whatever you wish, and you can totally put a label on the patch pocket if you wish. So it might be better to start with that. And I'm going to stitch on the base before I do the next pocket. So I'm just going to fold this in half and notch the halfway point. Because we don't have seams like on the bag to mark that for us. And we'll do the same here. I'll just fold this in half. And we'll just notch that on the fold there. And that means we know what we're doing. Right, okay, so now we've got the kind of fancier pocket. We're going to put a zip pocket in. If you don't want to do this, you do not need to. This is like an old vintage zip. We'll just check that it still works. It does. So I'm going to get a tiny bit of fusible. We're going to put it down about there. And we're going to put the zip underneath, fold it back beautifully. And then that will, again, just be patched on. Same as that, and it just means that pocket's a bit more secure, so you can kind of keep your keys, cards, more valuable stuff in there if you wish. Yeah. Right, okay, so we have a piece of fusing. I've just eyed this generously around the zip. I will probably cut this down. So we are going to put the zip about here. So what I'll do is I'll mark roughly with a pin. So we want the fusible to sort of cover this section. That's a nail, is it? There we go. Yeah, so we want the fusing trough to go along there, and I'm just gonna iron that along. Find a little piece of chalk, and a ruler is good here. So this is the length of your zip, and you're only going to cut a hole from the start to the end. You're not going to cut all the way along there. So this is the sort of size that we need to fold under. I'm just eyeing that that's pretty central, but you might want to be more meticulous than me and actually use your measuring tape or your mirror, or your ruler, not mirror. So marking that there, and then also again where the teeth are. So and then we'll get So we're gonna measure about 1/2 centimetre around this. And these are gonna be our sort of rough stitch lines. You can use chalk or whatever you want to mark. So we've made this sort of rectangle shape. We're gonna cut all the way down here, and then we're gonna go into little triangles at the side, right? You don't wanna cut too close. I might actually start with this. No, that's fine. I'll use my snips for this, shall I? Let's just get through it. Yep. And then, so I'm just cutting a bit there, and then I'm going to go out to each side like that. See? And like that, and then we'll go finish off the other side. I've cut a bit there, our line's there. Don't go beyond your mark, you want to be just inside it. And so we're going to take this over to the iron, and we're going to press all of this back, and you're kind of creating like a little window, and then we're going to put this underneath, stitch that on top, and it's going to look mwah. And that's our lining pretty much done. Get a few pins out. So yeah, we'll just pin this on. We'll stitch around. Again, I'm just going to do one row of stitching. So we have our lining, or half of it. Bases on that, this is our other bit. We're just going to fold this in half and mark that center point, and then pin it around again. But this is key, and I always forget this. You have to leave a little gap somewhere. If you don't, it's not the end of the world. You can unpick it, because when we stitch this into the bag, we need to then turn it through. So you leave a gap. It can be quite big. I'd probably say at least 5 inches. It's pretty thick, so you can do it smaller and you'll just have more time fighting to get it through. Totally up to you. I always forget to leave it, so I've just reminded myself. Yeah. And I've just realised I forgot to stitch that waistband on the base of the bag, but oh well. That was a fun detail idea. Right, okay, so let's notch this. And so I can see there's a notch there. And we're going to pin that. I'm actually just going to grab some more pins because I keep taking them over and then put them back across. So we'll pin there, and then yeah, just literally work your way around. So what I'll do is I'll leave a gap from about there to there. We'll see if I remember when I'm at the sewing machine, but I'm sure I will. There we go. Pinning is the boring bit, but it will make your life easier. At the end, you will thank yourself for doing it. That's one side, and so that's kind of matched up perfectly there. So I'm just going to go ahead and eye that to there. Just going to go ahead and, so I can see that's kind of sitting straight. That's gonna fit in nice. Might be a tiny bit extra. If you get wee bumps like that, just work your way back round. Maybe just being too tight up here. Cause you're going, yes. Yeah, look, it's grand. I can just go a smidgen more there. So yeah, it's worth if you take your time with the pinning, because okay, so I'm just gonna go across like so, and then the same here, and yeah, just pull out all your wee threads and you can trim them off at the same time. Boom. So there's no specific side you need to match one pocket to, it doesn't really matter, so just pop it in. So we'll take the lining, we're going to put this inside. Get your straps out the way. And in theory these should all be perfect, but it's worth just running your, again, yeah, just like pin and make sure everything's going to meet nicely. If for some reason this is a little bit bigger, you can just nip it in or take it out, but it should all just be perfect. Yep, that's looking good. You don't need too many pins here, we're just stitching straight across. Stop putting pins in your measure. So I'm just kind of doing a pin at each seam, really. Let's try and get that into there. Actually, wait a minute, I have not matched up the seams correctly. So make sure the base of your lining is meeting the base of the actual bag. That's a good idea. we go. And then, yeah, base to base. Just give it a wee shuggle. So this is the second last bit of sewing. We have pinned around all the seams. They're matching this time. We're just going to scoot around. Be careful not to get any straps. And then we're just going to pull it through. Trim our wee threads. Okay, so we've got this wee gap, and we're just going to, this is called bagging out. Just take your time, it's quite a bulky bag. Almost does. Get your straps out. There we go. Pop that inside. So we've got a bag and a lining. And yes, so this wee bit here, I'll just give it a wee press so it sits nice. I'm just going to stitch over that. Some people might want to actually do like a blind stitch, like hand sew, so you don't see it, but it's right in the base of the bag. Nobody's ever going to see it, and it'll still look clean, so don't worry. So we'll just give this a quick press. Alright guys, we have made a Coalesce Zero tote bag. So when we sell them, we actually normally have snap fasteners, as I showed you in the sample, there and there. These won't be included in the packs. You don't really need them, but you can get your kind of at-home kits, or you could actually use a hand stitch snap fastener. That would probably be easier for home use. So you get both sides, stitch one there and there by hand, and that'll bring that in there. And again, you can do that there and there. And if you want to have the closure here for like extra security, again, you can just put a snap fastener there and there, sort of on the denim facing side. I wouldn't put it as far down as the lining. But yeah, look, ain't she pretty? Gorgeous. And we've got our wee ReJean next to the buttons. Yeah? I'll go outside and watch on the street with my bag. She's pretty. Yeah. So, and it just kind of shows you, like, you can make something kind of pretty and unusual with your scraps. That's my kind of aim with this bag, is you can take remnants, and instead of trying to do a really clean, fancy patchwork, you can actually just layer them on top and make a feature of the raw. And that's why we've kind of done it clean and messy, because that sort of contrast, I think, works really well. So yeah, try it at home and send me pictures. So ReJean Denim is a gender neutral sort of workwear brand. We create sort of classic chore jackets. We kind of take that as a blank canvas, if you will, and we create kind of cool, sometimes quite colourful, like this one, patchwork jackets. We normally use about 3 or 4 pairs of old jeans, and sometimes corduroy, depends what we find. and we'll make pieces out of those. So our whole sort of brand ethos is kind of, our mission is to keep unwanted clothing out of landfill. In the UK, we have a 350,000 tonne a year textile waste problem. Had to get that out. And yeah, we're just trying to combat that. So far, we've estimated that we've saved over 400 kilos of denim from landfill. Each jacket is about 3 pairs, and then with our Coalesce Zero tote bags, the sort of remnants left over from making these jackets, we like to repurpose in kind of thoughtful, fun ways, hence the tote bag. It's kind of all raw patchwork, and we'll also make face masks from them more recently. We do bucket hats, we've got some new bags coming out, but yeah, we're always trying to use our scraps up, and just, you know, as a zero waste brand, we can still create waste, but we're always trying to minimize that as much as possible. We actually sell on our scraps, and we're developing new ways to kind of use them, but more on that later when that's developed. But yeah, so our main product really is our jackets. We do different drops throughout the year. We'll send batches to our stockists, and we do a custom jacket service. Because each piece is a little bit different because of the way we put it together, no two can ever be identical. So we sort of invite you guys to co-design your dream piece with us, and we have a menu of like some options, different ideas on the website, and you can kind of have a look through our gallery. And yeah, it's a really nice process because we sort of work together. You know, you can have as much or as little input as possible, and it's just a nice way to kind of get to know our customer, and yeah.